Two longtime political rivals come together to agree on a dramatic change to Michigan's role in national elections. Ford ups the ante and the commitment to electrification. Why isn't Michigan a bigger part of it? And Detroit homecoming again brings the expats back. Today is Sunday, October 3rd, 2021, and this is Flashpoint. Hi, welcome to Flashpoint. Hope your first October weekend has been a good one so far. We've got a lot to get to today. If you're a longtime watcher of Flashpoint, you know I've long been bullish on electric vehicles. I started with the Chevy Volt. I've now gone all electric with the Mustang Mach-E, and Ford is clearly going all electric too. Along with the Mach-E, they've got all those orders for the F-150 Lightning, and this week they announced an $11 billion investment in electrification. It is breathtaking in scope, with massive plants planned for Tennessee and Kentucky, but Michiganders couldn't help but notice their absence from the plant maps. Now, Ford is clearly committed to its hometown. The changes at the train station in Corktown testimony to that. But what happened here? The governor says Michigan wasn't given a chance to get into the race. Well, what does that mean? Ahead, we'll talk about the many ramifications of the announcement. We're also going to check in on what this year's Detroit homecoming proceedings meant as the city tries to strengthen the ties that bind expats to Motown. But up first, the push to get Michigan to join the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. In just about any other election, the person with the most votes wins. It's that simple. Not really so with the American presidency, which relies on the Electoral College. Should we change it, or did our founding fathers have it right? It's all today on Flashpoint.
Well, 5 times in American history, the winner of the popular vote in the presidential race has not gone on to become president. Now, that doesn't seem like a lot, and it's probably hard to get people in a wad about Rutherford B. Hayes or John Quincy Adams, but it's happened twice, obviously, in recent elections. And a lot of people have been taking a new look at the Electoral College system, and that includes 2 guys who have long been political rivals on opposite sides of issues. And I think it's noteworthy that they've come together in agreement on this one. And we've got both of them as our guests here to start things off today. Saul Anuzis, the former Republican chair in the state of Michigan, and Mark Brewer, the former Democratic chair. Guys, I really appreciate the time. Mark, let me start with you because I think that there's a lot of people that say, well, of course the Democrats are upset about the way things have gone. How do you dissuade them that this isn't just your own partisan issue?
Well, I think for the reason you indicated, you look at the history here, and this has affected both parties over the course of time. And I think it really offends our modern notion of majority vote and one person, one vote. That in every other election in this country, Devin, the person who gets the most votes wins. The only exception, the presidency. And Saul and I think that it's time for that to change. That whoever gets the majority votes nationwide becomes president. We cut through all this stuff about recounts and litigation and fighting and make it a simple majority vote election.
Now, Saul, I can't imagine how many texts and phone calls you've gotten from fellow Republicans who feel like you've completely burned down the house with this with this support. This is actually something, though, that you have been favoring for a long time, long before, say, the 2016 election, right?
Yeah, I had. I actually came out in favor of this in 2008. After Michigan was a battleground state when John McCain was campaigning here. And then next thing you know, on October 19th, we're not a battleground state. And I was very frustrated with the idea that, one day you can be relevant and people are paying attention to you and the next day you're irrelevant. And as Mark mentioned, I think the driving factor for me is I want to make sure that during presidential elections, every voter in every state is politically relevant. I think it's crazy when you take a look at the system we have today where 4 out of 5 Americans live in a state that's either decidedly Republican or decidedly Democrat, which basically means they're ignored in presidential elections. And we have a little pool of 10 to 12 states that are potential battleground states. And oftentimes we get down to 3 or 4 states that make a difference. And so the practical effect of that is we elect the president of the battleground states of America versus the president of the United States of America. And I think what Mark and I are saying as we campaigned, both in Michigan and around the country as chairs and members of our respective national committees, it's important that, presidential candidates campaign in all 50 states, that we have parties in all 50 states, and that the country as a whole participates in electing the one office actually does represent all 50 states plus the District of Columbia.
Mark, it wasn't as if, though, that this didn't dawn on our founding fathers as they were cobbling together the Constitution. I look at the Electoral College much as the way that I look at the way that they created the Senate, was to make sure that smaller states, places with that might otherwise not have a lot of influence, would be protected. How do you feel about sort of rolling up on our founding fathers, which is anathema to certainly a lot of Americans?
Well, it's not rolling up at all for at least two reasons, Devin. First of all, we don't change the Electoral College. It's there. This is not an amendment to the Constitution. The second thing is that I think this really honors the founding fathers who believed in federalism, and they believed it should be up to the states to decide how they choose their electors. And so here we are now over 2 centuries later, and we're a democracy that has evolved strongly in favor of majority rule, strongly in favor of one person, one vote. And what Saul and I are advocating allows each state to decide to elect their electors that way. So I think it does honor the founders by honoring the system they created.
That system, Saul, also, though, as Mark just pointed out, allows states to select their electors. It also allows states to decide how those electoral votes are to be divvied up. Why isn't it a better idea to go along with what Maine and Nebraska do, which is an apportioned dispensement of those electoral votes instead of all winner take all?
Right. I mean, they apportion them based on congressional district. And the problem is that they take the current system and make it a little bit worse. Today, we have 3 to 5 to 10 battleground states. And if you look at congressional seats, there's 30 to 40 competitive congressional seats out of 435. So instead of concentrating in 3 to 5 states, you're going to concentrate in 10 to 12 to 15 congressional districts, creating the similar situation where only a small group of voters really get to decide who the president of the United States is. And I think the beauty of what Mark was talking about, the founders wanted states to act in their selfish best interest. And you have to go back to the 19th century here, basically, as we moved into the 19th century, we literally had 40, 45 competitive states where presidential candidates did campaign in all 50 states. But the reality is the last time any candidate campaigned in all 50 states was Richard Nixon in the 1960s. And even then, he probably shouldn't have done it because we only had maybe 30, 35 competitive states, but he promised the American people he'd do it. So this is really about changing how we choose our electors, state by state. States are acting in their selfish best interest to make sure they're always relevant. Michigan is a very unique situation. Sometimes we're a battleground state, sometimes we're not. Yeah. And we can feel it both times. And so we want to make sure that we're always a battleground state. And by having a national popular vote where every vote in Michigan matters, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, campaigns are going to have to pay attention to the issues that affect our state, to the politicians who are our leaders at the time. And I think that's exactly what the founders had in mind.
Well, Saul, though, what do you say to your fellow Republicans who say, from a purely a point of self-interest and of political expediency, this would have changed. Donald Trump wouldn't have been president, and nor would George Bush. How do you handle that argument then?
Well, the reality is that we have never campaigned for a national popular vote. So we really don't know exactly how that would go. You play by the rules that were given to you. And if you go back to 1988, presidential campaigns have spent 95 to 90% of all their resources post-general elections in 10 states or less. So you really haven't run a national popular vote. But, this is where Mark and I probably disagree. I believe it's a center-right nation. I believe more people share our values than theirs. And therefore, I'm very comfortable of having Republicans take their message to the American people. And I think we're going to have a fair shot at winning. Not to put words in Mark's mouth, but I believe he believes the opposite is true, and he's willing to take that shot. What is unique about this position, though, it is quintessentially fair. Both of us have the opportunity to go to the American people, have our candidate, be he or she, make their best case to the American people, and let the best person win. I mean, we literally elect 514,000 other elected officials that way, except for the one that represents the country as a whole. And it causes all kinds of problems, both political and from a policy perspective.
Mark, I'm about to run out of time, but I want to let you take a shot at what you would say to Republicans who, I don't know how much sway you would have with Republicans to begin with, but what would you say to them to make the case that this isn't just Democrats trying to figure out a way to put the fix in?
Well, I would even say this to my own party, Devin. And look, things change. Michigan was not a battleground state for decades and decades and decades. This system would have ensured that candidates still campaign here. So things change. This is a long-run, fair system for both parties that levels the playing field and gives every party, every election, a chance to win. I think that's the message to all partisans.
Well, it's a fascinating debate, which makes it perfect for Flashpoint. And I know you guys now will get the petitions going. We'll see where it goes. Thanks so much for the time, and I know we'll talk about it again soon. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having us.
You bet. We'll continue with Flashpoint in just a moment. We'll talk about Ford's big bet on electrification. Back with more in just a minute.